So welcome this evening as we continue our series, traveling with the children of Israel from Egypt to the Promised Land. And we've been based in Exodus until tonight. We move out of Exodus tonight, possibly just for a while, but we're going to be in Numbers. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, fourth book in the Bible. And we're asking you to find verse 13, and it's not important that you use the same translation as others or version.
Which chapter
Some
you
of
in?
you I know like using the message. It's okay to use the message if you wish, and if you read out, we can follow in the correct version, whatever that is that we're using. Okay, so Numbers 13, and I'm going to ask that somebody please read verses 1 to 16. 1 to 16. So that's one more verse than the long list that you've got.
The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each tribe send one of its leaders." So the Lord commanded Moses to send them out for the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. These are their names. From the tribe of Reuben, Shemua, son of Zachariah. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hore. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Jemuel. From the tribe of Issachar, Idgal, son of Joseph. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hosea, son of Nun. From the tribe of Benjamin, Parthi, son of Raphtu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gladiel, son of Suli, From the tribe of Manasseh, a tribe of Joseph, Gadi, son of Sushi. From the tribe of Dan, Amariel, son of Gemini. From the tribe of Asher, Setu, son of Michael. And from the tribe of Naphtali, Narbai, son of Bobshi. And from the tribe of Gad, Gian, son of Malchi. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hosea, son of Nun, the name of Joshua.
I think that demands a round of applause.
Yeah. The only word I couldn't pronounce is ancestral.
You did pretty well, David. Really. Yeah. Okay. So let's just reflect on this for a moment or two. Let's put the context together first. The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan." I think in Joshua it actually says that the people asked Moses to do it, but here it's saying it was God who actually asked Moses to send people into the land. And so they picked somebody from each ancestral tribe to send one of the leaders of each tribe. And so we've got 12 men who go in to spy out the land. So this, in a sense, is checking things out before they are going to enter. So they've been told that they're coming to a land that's flowing with milk and honey. And they've also been told that the land that they are being given is already occupied, and God has spoken about driving out those that are there already. It may be of concern to some. Why should they drive people out? Well, there were some of those tribes that were notorious for child sacrifices. So very bad things had happened in their culture, and God was going to drive them out and give the land over to the people of Israel, which he'd of course promised way back before to Abraham. So a long time before. This was the land that God said. Do you remember that God said to Abraham that he was to leave his family and his land, and he was to travel to somewhere that God was going to show him? Where he took him was to the land that was thought of then as the land of Canaan. So the 12 spies are all named. We've got all their names here. Does anybody want to comment about the fact that Moses has recorded this event in such details, naming all of the spies one by one? Anybody want to comment on anything? Verses?
I think there are three things that are significant of this. First of all, it's looking back, and that it demonstrates that these are the sons of Israel, sons of Jacob. The second thing is everybody was involved. Every single tribe was involved. It wasn't just one tribe going in and saying, "Come and follow me." They all went in and they all spied. And the other thing is it's setting it up for the division of the land that will come later on in the Bible. That each of the tribes sorry, you just made me lose my thought. Each of the tribes are as important. They're equal. They all see the ancestry tree back to the original patriarchs, and they each have a part to play in the holy nation.
Okay, thank you, David. That's helpful. Can we just welcome Clive? It's nice to see you, Clive, and hopefully you're not on your own there, but you've got good company as well. Can you hear? We're back. Right. Okay. So David has put forward a number of suggestions that are mentioned here. He mentioned about the division of land, which would come along later. So when they took the land, it was divided up between the 12 tribes. Also, from what David was saying, just to remind everybody, the children of Israel are the children of Israel. That is Jacob. Jacob was renamed because of his struggle with God. Israel is the father of all these people that are mentioned in the first part of each line. So he was the father of Reuben, of Simeon, of Judah, Issachar, Ephraim, Benjamin, Zebulun, Manasseh, Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and Gad. So he was the father of all of those. And we see that Joseph has a son, and he gets included. That's Issachar included indirectly with him. So when they move in, they occupy the land as a federation, or a federation of tribes. So it was basically tribal, and here in the desert it was still tribal, and they used to camp in their own particular tribal areas. They all had designated areas that they occupied, and these were laid out very carefully around the tabernacle once the tabernacle was built. So recognizing the importance of each of the tribes was there. And obviously over the years, most of them disappeared, and we're just really left with Judah, from whom Caleb comes, the son of Jephunneh. Jephunneh or Jephunneh, I don't mind how any of these names are pronounced. You might have it right, and I've probably got it wrong. Hosea, who was the son of Nun. So those two are names that stand out, because 12 men were sent to spy in Canaan, the song goes, and we discover they are Caleb and Hoshea. And then verse 16 tells us his name changed, and he gets his name changed by Moses, who kind of becomes like an adopting father of Hoshea. And so Hoshea becomes an assistant. I nearly said a servant. It wasn't quite a servant, but he became Moses' assistant, and he helped him when they received the law. So he helped him with getting around up and down the mountain, apparently. And we heard a couple of weeks ago about when the Holy Spirit came down on the the tent of meeting, which is nothing to do with the tabernacle. It was just a tent of meeting, and Moses used to meet with God there and talk with God. And on one occasion, after Moses had finished talking with God, Moses went home. Hoshea tarried in the presence of the Lord. We also know his name was changed to Joshua, and Joshua was identified as leading the people of Israel against the battle with the Amalekites. And we read about that in chapter 15 of Exodus. So he's already been mentioned. He was mentioned not as Hoshea there, he was mentioned as Joshua. So what does it mean? What's in a name? Hoshea means salvation, and Joshua means the Lord is salvation. And Joshua is the Hebrew version of the Greek name Jesus. So Joshua means exactly the same as Jesus, means God is the Savior. So that's why his name was changed, so that it wouldn't be him who was being the Savior, but it was the Lord who was going to be working through him. There's also the issue, I think David touched on, of the issue of accountability. Each of these were spies. They shared together in the task. So they have shared responsibility for the report that comes back. We're going to move on into chapter 14 later on and see what it says there. So we'll pick it up a bit more. Are we ready to move on? Well, 17 through to verse 20. 17 to 20. No difficult names really here. Anybody want to pick up and continue our Bible reading?
These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land.
You need to go from verse 17.
Verse 17. Sorry, yes, I'm reading the same verse again. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and go on into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees on it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes."
Thank you very much. So these are the instructions that they're given. They are to explore Canaan and go through the Negev, which was a desert area, and go into the hill country around. And they were to do various things. Let's just talk about where they were going. The next chapter tells us a little bit more about the journey they take. And the length of the area they explore is about 250 miles. And they don't do a straight line. They do more or less a circuit, looking around. So they take 40 days in order to do this spying out, and they come back with their reports afterwards. But they are specifically asked to go to everywhere, to go on into the hill country. So they have to explore every part of the country, and they were to look at what is the land like, They were to look at whether the people live there are strong or weak. Are they few or many? What kind of land do they live in? Is it good land or bad land? Is it fertile? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or are they fortified towns? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Now, they've been spending quite a long time, about 2 years, traveling through a wilderness. So getting some idea of the place they're moving into was a really important thing. And for me, when I read this, the issue of checking out what's in the land, for me, seemed a very important thing. And it reminded me of a couple of things. It reminded me, first of all, that Jesus talked about counting the cost for those who wanted to be his followers. Do you remember there were some people who said they wanted to follow Jesus, but they wanted to do things before. So there was a person who bought the equivalent of a new tractor and needed to try it out. There was another person who just got married and needed to get to know his wife. So there were various excuses, all of which were quite valid, although there was a good reason for them not being valid. But they would look, at first sight, they would look quite natural. Now, Jesus said it's important to count the costs. And he told kind of illustrations, one of which was somebody who goes to war and doesn't know the strength of the enemy before he goes to war. Now, we're living in a time like that right now. We've had a situation in which President Trump has entered into a war with Iran and clearly did not check it out in advance. Neither did he check out what the attitude was of his own people. So now he hasn't succeeded in his main aims in going into war. He's killed an awful lot of people and he's achieved quite a bit, but he has not achieved a regime change, and he has not taken over the nuclear, not the arsenal, but the materials that would be used for making nuclear weapons. He hasn't got that. And he's ended up causing enormous problems in the world economy by aggravating the Iranians, and they've then shut the water channel, with so vital for bringing supplies in and out, including most countries getting their oil from that area. So it's created an enormous problem because he didn't check it out in advance. So that was a serious shortcoming on his part. And so that was one of the illustrations that Jesus gave of the importance of counting the cost first. The other illustration was somebody who was going to build a tower, and they only get halfway up and they run out of money and resources. And so you get a half-built tower. And both would end up being a topic of ridicule. Who don't want to be ridiculed, you need to count the cost. I don't know whether it reminds anybody of any other passage of scripture, but I thought of another one. It's an Old Testament passage where the issue of counting the cost was significant. Anybody want to take a stab and see if you can guess at what's in my mind? Passage we've read and talked about in the past, but a long time ago. Okay, I was thinking of Nehemiah.
On the wall.
Okay. When he comes to Jerusalem, in order that he might rebuild the walls, the first thing he does is he goes out in the middle of the night and he rides around on a donkey all around the wall, checking out what needs to be done. And then he starts to organize the workers and all the supplies so that they can get on with the task. So the first thing he does, no, that's not true. What was the first thing that Nehemiah did? Really important. What did he do before he started assessing the cost?
He prayed.
Absolutely, he prayed. For 6 months he prayed and he wept before the Lord in prayer. So yeah, really important. So counting the costs. Anybody else want to comment about that? Its relevance, particularly for those of us that want to follow Jesus. Don't hold back from coming up with suggestions, because I'm not giving away any booby prizes if you say something I think is wrong, which is unlikely, I know. And I'm not giving out any real prizes for anybody who comes up with a really good answer. I can just give you an applause.
There's a problem, isn't there, about counting the cost? Because those who said to Jesus, look, I'd like to follow you, but I'd like to bury my father first, and so on, they were sensibly counting the cost. However, Jesus said to them, let the dead bury the dead. So they were coming up with very good, sensible reasons for not following him, but he pointed out to them that they had their priorities wrong. And when God asks us to do something, very often we can find very sensible reasons for not doing it, because our priorities are wrong. And we can say to ourselves as a good excuse, well, we've got to count the cost of doing that. And I remember a book being produced some years back when John was at the bookshop by one of the leaders in Youth with a Mission. And he took his family to work in one of the red light areas in the Netherlands. And everyone said to him, you're very foolish and very cruel and so on, taking your family to live in this area because it's extremely dangerous. And he said, it's the safest place on earth I can take them, because it's the place where God has called us. And, so he put first what God had called him to do, rather than sensibly counting the cost of taking his children and his wife to a place where they were likely, on an earthly sense, to live in a very dangerous area.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get that balance right unless you really do know the voice of God.
I think that also there's a huge difference. I mean, it's a really helpful illustration. But I think there's a huge difference between our understanding of counting the cost and at the time of Jesus and the first disciples. If people stood up to say they were believing in Jesus and committing their life to him and going to follow him and live by his rules and so on, there was enormous risk of losing their life. And the early Christians were persecuted on one hand by the Romans, who were ruling in the area and were keen not to have political unrest. On the other hand, it was the Jews, or many of the Jews, who were opposed because they felt the claim that Jesus made to be the Messiah, or that people made of Jesus to be the Messiah, could be either and both, that was heresy from their point of view, and they didn't want to lose their authority and power when there was a question mark in their minds as to whether Jesus was genuinely the Messiah. So there was persecution from both sides, sometimes colliding, which made it extremely risky to be a Christian. And we've talked before about those that suffered, particularly those who were sent to the stake and were turned into torches, covered with pitch and set on fire, all sorts of terrible things done to them. So, in a sense, counting the cost in that time was possibly more important. And in many countries in the world, not the majority, I'm glad to say, but in many countries, it's still quite dangerous to openly confess that you're a Christian. Whereas here in the UK, it's no cost at all. I can't think that there's much of a cost to deciding to follow Jesus, although it could present a challenge to your relationship with family members. So that's an issue. So there could be problems there. But in the main, making a decision to follow Jesus isn't as difficult and scary as it used to be.
Unless you're a Muslim convert.
Yeah.
Again,
Unless you're a convert from Islam.
All right. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I think we've become very risk adverse as Christians. I was thinking this earlier on today, that God calls us to be risk takers. So sort of these people who say, well, I don't really want to talk to my friends about Jesus because they may not like me anymore because I'm not prepared to take that risk.
Yeah.
And I think very much, though I understand where you're coming from, Barry, I think sometimes our focus shouldn't always be on the cross, but it should be on our Saviour. And if God's called us to do something, he sort of, Jesus said, "Follow me," and he went to the cross, and he expected everybody else to make sacrifices like he does. And I think being a Christian is about making sacrifices. I think we've come to sort of to this point where it just becomes a hobby.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for many people,
that's why we're not so effective.
Yeah, I think for many people that's how it's treated.
Yeah, I mean, I've become afraid to witness, and when I first became a Christian, I didn't care whether my friends went off me or not. I mean, I remember one friend saying, I can't remember how the conversation started, but she said, "Well, I'm not a sinner," and I said, "All have sinned and fallen short from the glory of God." And I just quoted Romans to her. I mean, I didn't care whether she made my friend or not. And I'm amazed now that I did that. I mean, for one thing, I'm amazed I remembered the quote so well, but I'm amazed that I didn't care whether she remained my friend or not, you know. And then gradually, as time went on, I became a lot more, well, you know, I ought to be careful about what I say to people and how I say it and blah, blah, blah. And I see it with others. You know, I remember a young woman who became a Christian, and she couldn't wait to witness to people. You know, she just was looking for opportunities all the time. And now she's a grandmother. I wonder whether she's still the same. It's more difficult as you get older, unless you've got a real gift for it.
I think sometimes people who have received the gift of being an evangelist find it very easy and then wonder why others don't.
Yeah.
My first calling into ministry was as an evangelist, and I do find talking about Jesus comes very easily. So I try to talk with people and talk about my faith in as natural a way as possible. More or less, I'm surprised you don't believe when I do. So when I went as a young Christian, my first job, I was quite open about the fact that I was a Christian. I made a point of reading from the Daily Telegraph every day, the text, and reading it aloud for others to hear what it said. When I was in hospital recently, being looked after by people from other countries, some of whom were Muslims and Hindus and so on. And we talked quite openly about faith issues there, but in as pleasant and polite way as possible. I always remember the little saying that you need to be winsome to win some. And so if we want to win some for Christ, we need to be careful. And the Bible speaks about being ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us, but doing it with gentleness and humility.
I think we have to remember both sides of that quote. I think we're quite good at giving a reason, but sometimes we don't do it with gentleness and humility at times.
No.
I think it's in 1 Peter, David.
Very gentle with down.
Either chapter 1 or chapter 3, I think. But it is important, and it hitting people over the head with Bible quotations isn't always the best way. I'm not being critical of Dot and her witness back then, but sometimes people just quote, and it doesn't help if they're quoting Old English as well. So it always go home.
We're still in touch, actually. That woman, we're still in touch. Not very often, but we still exchange emails and Christmas cards.
I wonder if she's ever thought any more about what you said.
I wonder.
Okay. Any more want to comment about that, or shall we move on to verse 21? Let's move on. Verse 21, and we read through to verse 27. No, verse 25, 21 to 25. So a third person, somebody who's not read preferably, like to read 21, 25. Don't think there's any particular difficult verses, but if there is, I just suggest you cough, jump over them and move on. So after you've come to Hebron, where the descendants of Anak lived, okay?
Well, there's a few names in this. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob, towards Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land.
Thank you very much. So let's just grab hold of the generality of what we're reading. Where they're starting out from is a place called Kadesh Barnea, which gets mentioned several times, quite a significant place, Kadesh Barnea. And that's on the southern border of Israel. So they've traveled to the southern border. And where they were to go, it said, as far as Rehob towards Lebo Hamath. That's right up in the north. So it's 250 miles between the two places that are there. And they took 40 days taking them there and bringing them back. You can do the maths. I did start thinking about it. I don't know how far I got, but how many miles a day they must have covered. I think it wasn't much more than 12 miles a day, but you could do the maths, and if somebody's done it while we're speaking, we'll fit it in. And they talk about all the different people that were there. So the descendants of Anak are mentioned. We're told about them later on. The Anakites get mentioned. Hebron is mentioned. There's a link in the history of Israel with that area. And so there's reference to that. And the Valley of Eshcol, which gets its name meaning cluster, which goes with there being a cluster of grapes there. So it's taken 40 days and they've returned from exploring the land. So they've been sent out with specific instructions, and then by verse 24, was it 25? They had returned from their journey. We're going to read on to find out what kind of message they brought back. It's amazing thinking about a cluster of grapes that takes 2 people to carry.
Mm. Well, there were pomegranates and figs as well, weren't there?
Yes. These were wine grapes, I'm told.
I find it extraordinary how often 40 days crops up.
Yes.
You wonder if it was exactly 40 days or whether, it's particularly significant, or whether it was a just round figure that they keep saying to give some idea of this length of time.
Yes. It's a bit like we might say going for a fortnight, but it might actually be 15 days or something,
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we read on and read their report? Okay, so we've got to verse 26, and we need to read through to verse 29, 26 to 29.
They presented themselves before Moses and Aaron and the whole congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They reported to the whole congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told the story of their trip. We went to the land to which you sent us, and oh, it does flow with milk and honey. Just look at this fruit. The only thing is that the people who live there are fierce. Their cities are huge and well fortified. Worse yet, we saw descendants of the giant Anak. Amalekites are spread out in the Negev. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites hold the hill country, and the Canaanites are established on the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan.
Thank you. Now we read a little bit more than that in the next chapter, which we'll leave until we come to it. But we've got enough there to tell us about it. So the descendants of Anak were particularly tall and particularly strong. So they were like giants, and maybe, I don't know whether Goliath came from that line. He was 9 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
These people, there were men there that were really, really tall and strong. So they brought back the message to say, yes, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. Here's some of the produce. It's really lovely. It's wonderful. But then they add a kind of but to it. But the people who live there are powerful. The cities are fortified and very large. And then they itemize all the people. So this is the first hint in the writings of Moses that something's going to go wrong, seriously wrong at this point. And we will come back to that and talk about what was the nature of that, how it is. Some of that is a little bit more in chapter 14. But immediately after the bit that we've just read, when they've itemized all the problems, Caleb speaks up. And it's Caleb, rather than Joshua. Caleb speaks up, silenced the people before Moses, and he said, we should go and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. So he immediately wants to argue the case for going into the promised land and not being afraid of the difficulties that were going to front. He didn't minimize the problems. He had seen the Anakites. He'd seen these great people, and he has something to say specifically about that, which is interesting, which you see in a moment. So, but he's saying we should go, we should take possession, we can certainly do it. So counting the cost, but not giving up, not saying no way, actually being bold. And so the need for courage and confidence in God was what I think Caleb is arguing for here. But that then prompts a response from the others who'd gone up with him. So we need somebody to read the last part of the chapter. That's reading on from where I've just read. So reading on, please, from verse 31 to the end of the chapter. The men who'd gone up with him said, we can't attack these people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, this land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim, the descendants of Anak there, come from the descendants of Anak come from Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our eyes, and we look the same to them. So, by comparison, being small and feeble. When I was in my junior school, I got picked on a great deal. I had a childhood in which I was quite ill often, and I wasn't very strong, and I certainly wasn't very confident. I was one of those that are usually the last to be picked to play a football. So when they're choosing teams, I was the last person to be chosen. And it made you just aware that you weren't anybody important. And so I lacked confidence. But my mother, who was a redhead and had grown up with two brothers, one older and one younger than herself, she was a fighter, and she used to fight with her brothers, and they used to give in to her because she fought so well. And she gave me lots of hints on how to fight. It was very helpful on the last day of school because I got bullied by a boy called David Tobit and decided I was going to fight back. I wasn't going to take it anymore. So I fought back against David Tobit, who was an Anglo-Indian boy, very strong, very muscular. And strangely, I managed to beat him.
Yes.
But, not a good thing in every sense, because when I went to the next school, I was brimming over with confidence and picked a fight with a boy called Bernard Ansell, who was banging me with a box he was having to carry around with ink bottles. And so I said, I'll see you in the car park afterwards. So I squared up to him to have a fight with him, full of my confidence, having beaten David Tobit, only to find out that Bernard was the South of England schoolboy boxing champion.
No.
Not a good thing to do. Right, okay. So we're left in this chapter with this sense of despair, how we look compared to others. These people have been intimidated by what they've seen. They've seen grapes, huge clusters of grapes, and they've seen pomegranates, and they've seen all the wonderful things that are in the land. It's true. What they were told about it is true. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, which is just an expression to mean that it was highly fertile. There's going to be plenty of food there. There's nothing to worry about supplies. There's ample supplies. But at the same time, they've seen all the negative aspects. It isn't a walk in the park. It's not an easy situation. There's going to be people that we've got to overcome. We've got to find. They're not going to be very happy about our moving into this land. How are they going to respond? And the reference to Nephilim is interesting. If you've done any Bible research, you might have come across various possible suggestions, one of which was that it talks about the sons of God having sexual relationships with the daughters of Jacob, and might have said the daughters of Esau, I'm not sure, but anyway. But there's a suggestion of angels and humans having relations and a hybrid nation coming. Well, I think that's a bit far stretched, but it's one of the theories that come. So the origin of the Nephilim and why they were so big and powerful and so on indicates that there was perhaps some sort of spiritual dimension. And the implication in the name Nephilim is also it's about coming down. So that's again, that sort of supports the angelic explanation. Anybody want to ask a question or make a comment?
Well, when at the beginning of the chapter, God said to Moses, send one man from each ancestral tribe, each one a tried and true leader in the tribe. And I've written next to it, in the end, they were not a very brave or visionary bunch. I mean, they were tried and true leaders, but only Caleb and Joshua had the vision and the courage. So, what marked those two out as being the exceptional leaders? I mean, what marked them out was the fact that they believed God, isn't it? They had the vision, they had the courage because they believed God was on their side, really. The others must have been very good leaders in their tribes. That's why they were chosen. But they were only good compared with the rest of the tribe. that's how it's always going to be, and unless you see yourself and your tribe in relation to God.
Yeah. In the song that I was quoting from earlier, which some of you may remember from children's work days in the past, 12 men were sent to spy in Canaan, 10 were bad, 2 were good. Some saw the giants tough and tall, some saw the grapes in clusters fall, some saw that God was in it all. 10 were bad, 2 were good. And I think that line, some saw that God was in it all. I mean, they have come to this land because God has brought them to it, and God had promised it to their forefathers. God had said this was going to be their inheritance. So God had set this aside, and it's that they seem to have lost. And we'll talk more about that next week, God willing. One comment that is worth mentioning here, and that's about these Anakites, the children of Anak, who were so big and so tough and difficult. And Caleb says, "Oh, come on, nothing's too hard for the Lord. We could sort them out." Well, he actually does do that. Okay, so if you flick across to the book of Joshua and chapter 15, you'd find that there is a record of Joshua driving out the Anakites. So, sorry, not Joshua, Caleb.
Caleb.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said Caleb, not Joshua. So Caleb actually does put to action where his words were, prove himself to be true.
Strangely, I mean, I had a conversation this afternoon in our Time Out group with our artist, and he mentioned that his son was having a crisis caused by anxiety, and how it was impeding really his life with a sports group that he had previously enjoyed. And we were talking about how confidence affects the way that you view yourself and other people, which is very much like this passage. And I'd asked him whether he'd watched the series on Gareth Southgate's dealings with the England football team, because I'd watched all 3 of them. And I found it electrifying, really, the way that he said that he still feels the pain of losing the penalty in 1996, but he recognizes that it was the making of him, and it was all to do with the fact that he expected to lose.
Yeah.
And why did he expect to lose? And why do the team expect to lose?
Yes.
And why are they so afraid to lose? And the fact that we are often afraid to try things because we're afraid to lose, and so on. And I mean, it was just how it was adapted from a stage play to a series for television. I'll never know, but I thought it was wonderful. And I was saying to Andy, who, like me, isn't interested in sport, I said, what interested me about it was the same as it always is the psychology of sport, of the winning and the losing, and about how when you retire and how you feel about retiring and all that kind of thing. And I said that there was an example which sounds very different, but a friend of ours in the church, when her husband got the job in Stamford's teaching job in Stamford School, they felt inferior to all the other staff, because the other staff had all come from posh backgrounds and they'd all been through Oxford and Cambridge. And she and her husband had just had diplomas from that teacher training college. And the first staff dinner they went to, she wore a pretty little dress, and it was embroidered and so on, and a sort of mini dress. And when they arrived, all the women wore ankle-length dresses, and she felt immediately that she was being looked at with scorn.
Yes.
Oh, this young woman doesn't know the core, the dress core and so on. And it took me a while when I'd come home to think, gosh, it was what I should have said to her is, probably all those women were thinking, I wish I had her confidence. I could never have turned up wearing a dress like that. Thank goodness I could hide my swollen ankles or my varicose veins, or I could have carried off that dress when I was her age. Hasn't she got lovely skin? And it's the fact that she felt herself like a grasshopper, that she thought that all these giants were looking down on her. Whereas in fact, maybe it was completely the other way around. And the fact that she was a modest woman couldn't understand that.
Yes.
It's so often, we think of ourselves as the grasshopper, and in fact, it's the other way around.
It raises a question, doesn't it? In this situation we've been reading about, had they lost confidence in God or in themselves? They didn't answer that. Just file it away. We talk about it again next week. But what was happening with this sense of inequality and inability that is preventing them from entering the promised land? But so we're going to read more next week about how what they said had an impact on the rest of Israel, and then we're going to read what was the impact on God. What was God's analysis of it? How did he view the situation? So we're going to do all that next week and read the consequences of their decision. So we've got quite a lot to cover next week, but I hope that this week has been helpful and that we've been able to apply it to ourselves. Just think about, I know that because I had this incredible inferiority complex as a young lad in primary school, that I had to overcome. And I'm aware of how easily it took over my life in other ways. And I look back on the fact that a prominent Christian leader was able to exercise power and authority over me, which he should never have done. But I allowed him to do it because I felt he was superior and I was inferior. So it does fashion how we live our lives. And I've heard many other men talk about being the last one to be picked for the football team, and how it made them feel, and how it created a pattern throughout their life, their adult life. So it is a significant thing. So how we finish up with the thought of how they saw themselves. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. How they saw themselves through their own eyes. That's how they came back out of the land, having looked at it and seen it. All they could see was their inadequacy in the situation.
So sad, isn't it?
It is indeed.